Hey Bulls, how are we doing? Let me get more. Yeah, let's just move the camera to where I'm going. And I did it the opposite way. And now it's unimmersive because my screen's moved. Alright. Sorry, I moved around some of my stuff because I was doing some spring cleaning the other day, so... Alright. So welcome back. Another week. So, as you can see, we got some Kill Team terrain. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the terrain because, honestly, pretty simple. But we're going to spend a little bit on it and go over just some cool little things that we did for it that you might enjoy. So, this is the terrain prototype. And it's getting there. It's almost done. So there's only a few things left to do on it. And of course, because it's terrain, we're not trying to be like super like detailed and crazy with it. Obviously, you can go much faster than this, of course, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that because it's terrain. You know, people have you know, varying measures of what they consider necessary for their terrain, but pretty much everybody goes around the philosophy that you shouldn't spend a whole lot of time with it. So, I'm going to keep working on this one for a moment, let some people get in here, and then I will go over how I got to this point so far. And this one actually doesn't have much left before it's done. Just got a couple of places that I need to paint metal and wash. And there's actually a couple of different washes I use on this. Well, technically 2 different washes and 1 technical paint that I'm using for this piece. And then I'll probably use another technical when it comes to some of the bronze trim and whatnot on some of the buildings, but that you don't see quite as much of. The ones with the big eagles on them, I'll probably use some Nylock oxide on that after painting like a bronze color on it or something. Maybe something a little bit more golden, not sure yet. We'll see. But that is something that only occurs a few times across the entire set of terrain, so that's not as big a deal as, you know, figuring out how you want to do the big stuff, you know, the broad strokes, so to speak. Let me get this close. Here, let me just adjust the focus. There we go. Everybody can see what's going on here. Now, my focus with this terrain today is just going to be showing you guys like some really fast techniques that can give you some really cool results. And I think you'll enjoy them. It's like this part right here, painting the metallics in, is probably the longest part of this process. As the first steps are actually pretty quick. And I fully recommend giving them a shot if you've got the tools and the time. Honestly, like, if you see the chipping here, adding this into doing your terrain is as fast as adding the dry brushing step after like just painting it one solid color. It really is that simple. And I will show you guys all about it. It's called hairspray chipping, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail in just a moment. I just want to give people a chance to get in here so that I know I'm going to have to explain it more than once, but I'm going to try to minimize it a little bit by giving some people a chance to get in. And many of you out there may already be familiar with hairspray chipping and already tried it in and yeah, and are familiar with its sometimes magical powers to give you very realistic weathering, or at least very appealing weathering very quickly. And yeah, I know it's some of you probably think this is way more time painting terrain than I would ever spend. And you know, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, of course you're right. If it's more time than you would spend painting terrain, how would I challenge that? But anyway, yeah, normally I would not spend this long painting terrain either. But this is the only 40k terrain I own at home, and I actually have enough room in my home to play Kill Team. Have my own little space set up so that I can play 4x4 games, and Kill Team fits neatly into that. So yeah. So I want to have my lone terrain set actually look good. And that way I can dual purpose it. I can use it for Kill Team, I can use it for Necromunda, any of those, you know, smaller skirmish type games I can play at home. Or even, you know, don't tell anyone, Infinity? No. I don't even, I mean, I have an Infinity gang. Still sitting in the box. Hasn't really done much. I put together this one guy. Yeah, he's still very shiny. Maybe one day we'll get around to painting him on stream, but we'll see. We got lots of other things going on. So backlog on different kinds of shows that I want to do, things I want you guys to see first. Then maybe I'll get to Infinity when I'm properly motivated. So. Or when Larry bugs me and says, hey, we need a stream on Infinity. There's that possibility too. So today what I want to do is we're going to look over our Grey Knight that we did last week. And just basically finish his backpack and see if there's anything else we missed. I don't think so, though. I think he's completely done other than his backpack. That shouldn't take much time. And then I want to start getting into a Death Guard prototype and see what our first Death Guard guy is going to look like. You know, you get that just little bit of paint somewhere you don't want it. It's always hard to get it to go away. There we go. Oh my. That is Frontline Gaming. Wow, coming through with the host. Thank you so much. Always appreciated. Yeah, Frontline Gaming is always good to me. They come through with that host like almost every week. Not that it's something I take for granted. I certainly do not. I very much appreciate it. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy the show. And don't worry, we're not doing terrain the whole time on the show today. I'm just gonna show you guys a few techniques that I'm doing with my Kill Team terrain, and then after that, I'm gonna do just a tiny bit with the Grey Knights, just to reiterate on some of the things we did last week while I just finish his backpack real fast and show you how I'm gonna do his base. But other than that, what I really want to spend some time on is working on a Death Guard prototype. And it's actually sort of a second prototype because I've already done one in a white color scheme, and what I want to do now is do this one that's in the green. So, and he is also done with the hairspray chipping technique that I'm going to go over with these buildings. So it's actually a very versatile technique if you like weathering, and so I think you'll enjoy it. Alright, so I think we got quite a few people here now. So as soon as I finish this coat on this fan here, I'll go into how we do hairspray chipping. In fact, I could probably explain it at the same time. Let me just grab an example here. Alright, so let's say you got something you want to have some chipping on, something like this chipping that you see here. Now this is pretty extensive chipping because it's a building and I wanted the gray to show through a whole lot. But you can also go a little more subtle with it. With like what this guy has. It's actually not all that subtle, but but it will not look quite as much of the chipping when I'm finished painting him, all his banding and all of that. And so, anyway, on to how I'm doing the building. So, just spray paint it, Administratum Gray. Picked it because if I needed to touch up anything, I knew I would have a color out of the pot that I could use to do the touch-ups. But actually went on really well and didn't really need to do any of that. So, took that, and then I just covered it in spray paint. I sprayed it with hairspray. Just, just one quick coat of hairspray. You don't need to, like, douse it dripping or anything like that. You know, just give it a good coat of hairspray. Nice and fast. And, once that dries, you then take either an airbrush or another spray paint, though I will say it is a lot easier if you have an airbrush to do the chipping later. But if you don't have an airbrush, there's just no way, then you can use another spray color. And yeah, GW sprays will work for that as well. But the chipping is harder because the spray paint is much more assertive in how it holds on to the model, so keep that in mind. So in this case, after hairspraying my model, I took some Karak stone and a generous dose of Flow Improver, because it is one of GW's base paints, and this one's sort of an old bottle too, so it's got some gunk in it that needed to be cleared out as well. And gave it a nice coat over a hairsprayed piece of building. So, to reiterate the steps, base coat it, whatever color you want the chips to be. Then spray it with some hairspray. Let the hairspray dry. Get out your airbrush or spray can of the next color, and then spray it whatever color you want it to be. And then you can either take an old brush, like say what you would use for dry brushing, though I would make sure if you're going to use a brush you normally use for dry brushing, make sure it has no paint on it, because that will leave smears and streaks on your model. I use an old toothbrush most of the time, and so you get it just damp, not like super wet, just damp. And you just needs to be a little more damp than it was. There we go. This, because it's a building, I can actually get a little bit more damp. If you're doing this on like a figure, then you probably want to be a little more reserved with how much moisture you use at one time. Like here at the top of this pillar, I can really just kind of go for tons of chipping. I mean, in theory, this whole pillar is going to not really have any paint on it. Why would you paint the inside of the pillar, right? So, you can really go heavy there, and then for like, you want just a little bit inside the pillars. In these little, I guess guess you could call them indentations, but they're sort of like ornamentations, really, in the columns. And then, you know, sort of around places where you have cracking and, you know, broken parts and things, it's where you really want it to be just kind of a little heavier. Sort of emphasize the wear and tear that the structure has suffered in a lot of places, you know, just give them a little bit more attention. And if you use a spray paint instead of an airbrush for your overcoat, it's going to take a little bit more work, a little bit more elbow grease, but it will still come through the same way. But I recommend, no matter what, that you start off a little bit easy on it. Because if you go too much water right in the beginning, you could end up just like peeling off your entire overcoat and going straight down to your chipping color in no time. So keep that in mind. When you're doing this, just, you know, start out taking it easy, and then if you're not getting any chips to show through, just slowly take it up a notch, a little bit at a time, until you get the chipping you're looking for. And normally I try to go for, like, you know, small chipping like this for the entire model. But since this is a building and not, you know, just a dude walking around in worn out armor, we can go a little more dilapidated and bigger chips and more chips and so on. Especially, you know, making sure that the edges and so on are getting chipped up. Let's see, we're finally getting some in the column here. And here, you know, where things are really busted up, we can really give it some thorough chipping. You know, exposed areas that would see a lot of wear and tear. And you can use this on Space Marines, you know, anything that has painted armor, vehicles. It works great on tanks, and not just in 40K and bolt action, or, you know, any kind of genre, you know, that has large tanks. I've tried this with smaller models like Flames of War size. I don't really think I don't think it works all that well, but I'm still experimenting with that, so the jury's still out on it. Definitely works well for this scale, though, for sure. All right. And now, after I do the hairspray chipping, my next step is just a good dose of Seraphim Sepia. Now, normally I'm pretty careful about applying my washes very, very evenly, but in this case, you know, it's a building, it gets splashed, washed, you know, by the weather and the elements and so on. And so, you know, and it's also a terrain piece, so you don't want to spend forever meticulously washing every last bit very carefully. So I just gave it a good washing and didn't really care too much if there was a little bit of, you know, overrun here, like you see over here in this pillar. Perfectly fine, because, you know, in a way it just kind of adds character to the building as, you know, just a worn out structure. So, yep. And then once that was dry, I took some Screaming Skull and gave it a good dry brushing with that. And the highlights really do bring out a lot in the building. So, and for the metal parts, nothing special, just good old Iron Breaker, followed by some Agrax, and then just dry brush on a little bit of Runefang Steel as a highlight, and bam, you're all done. Now, for these, there is one additional thing I like to do, though, not just the Ironbreaker and Agrax Runefang combo that I like to do for a lot of metal. I like to break things up a little bit for these with a very easy to use, well, at first it takes a little bit of, messing around with, but Typhus Corrosion works very well for like corroded pipes and anything that, you think, well, this is definitely metal, but it shouldn't be shiny, but at the same time I want it to still look like it belongs and be metal. So a good example here is this conduit tubing here. So all I did was I took, I just painted it lead belcher, just like I'm doing with this over here. And then I take Typhus Corrosion and I just paint the Typhus Corrosion over it. But Typhus Corrosion is also, has a bit of a texture to it, because it has some like granulated, like, corroded pigments in it, or corrosion colored pigments in it, that sort of give it that look. And so after I'm done, I take like a short, stiff brush, and I just brush over it a bit to make just a little bit of the metal color show through a bit more, just on the raised areas, and that really does help complete the effect a whole lot. So I recommend doing that at the end, right after you've given the Typhus Corrosion a moment to dry. And that'll give you the look you're looking for, and super easy. And that's, when you're doing terrain, that's the real thing. You want techniques that are effective, but you can also apply them very quickly, easily, and you won't lose your mind when you're applying them to building number 10. Like here I'm going a little bit further than I probably normally would with terrain, by actually going and painting all the metal parts one at a time. But as I said earlier, this is going to be sort of my one terrain set to rule them all at my house, so I think it's worth putting a little bit of extra time in it. So if you guys have any questions so far about this, any of the stuff I've done with the terrain at this point? I was gonna ask, so is the guy who does Frontline Gaming, I'm sorry, I don't know if I ever actually met you in person. I may have at some point, maybe at Wargames Con, because I know you do big convention circuit, but if you are here, could you let me know? Because I have to actually apologize to Frontline Gaming, because he hosts me like almost every week, and I never get to see his show because I wake up usually at like 2 p.m. because I work nights, and so I usually miss his whole show. So honestly, for terrain, if you want to try a color, try it out. The worst that can happen is the worst that can happen is you experiment with it and you don't like the experiment and you end up just taking some rubbing alcohol or green or simple green and just stripping it again and trying over again. I mean, that's the worst that can happen, you know, especially with terrain. You know, if you want to try like blue walls, red walls, whatever, man, like give it a shot, try it. You know, just keep in mind that if you want to do hairspray chipping like this, that you want to do something that complements, that they complement each other. Like you don't want like I don't want to say you don't want to have like brown chips with red, but you have to make sure that you have to experiment a little and make sure that the brown chips actually show up through your red, because sometimes if the colors are too close to each other, sometimes one color will mask the other and you can't really see the chipping. Oh, and yes, and greetings from America. Or rather Texas, you know, to be more specific, I guess you could say. So, what part of Germany? It's been a few years since I was last out there. But I do enjoy going to Germany occasionally and trying to speak auf Deutsch, and then realizing that everybody speaks English and that they speak way better English than you speak German, and so you end up just speaking English the whole time you're there. Oh, Dusseldorf, okay. I actually never been to Dusseldorf, but I hear it is quite the town. Yeah, in fact, for Team Yankee, even though I sort of fell into it, I didn't actually pick West Germans. It's what we got to start out promotionally, but I play West Germans for Team Yankee. I must say, though, you know, for being a choice that was made for me, it was a great choice because they're pretty ridiculous in that game. I'd say they are the most powerful faction in Team Yankee right now. Not to say that they can't be beaten, though. They certainly can be. But they are pretty tough. And they were, of course, fun to paint because they're all in the NATO camouflage scheme. For those who are unfamiliar, Team Yankee is a mid-'80s Cold War goes hot tabletop mini game, and so you have, you know, all the NATO countries, you know, U.S., West Germany, France, Great Britain, the Dutch. I mean, there's all kinds of NATO factions in the game now, versus the Warsaw Pact, which is, of course, the Soviet Union being the big one. The other big one right now is West Germany. Hopefully they're going to introduce more antagonists for NATO soon into the game, and I think they're going to when they do Oil Wars, which is going to be sometime like probably the next 6 months probably. And I think that'll be pretty neat to see how they're going to expand on the original, you know, Team Yankee world. And also that means that now I have a reason to paint my U.S. Marines whenever I get around to them. I can paint them in desert colors now. Because, I mean, you really can only paint one army in NATO camouflage before you just go crazy and don't want to do it ever again. So it'll be nice to do a different color scheme. And I don't want to paint Murdic either, because that just looks like a nightmare. So yeah, it's probably for the best that a lot of Germans speak excellent English, because, yeah, my German's pretty bad. My Russian's okay, but for German, mostly just my reading is sort of okay. My speaking is basically like non-existent. And then, of course, you know, when I was able to speak German like minimally, everybody told me I spoke with a Russian accent. I'm like, well, that makes sense, but it's unfortunate. But yeah, it was easy to figure out why, because I learned Russian before I learned German. So. And it took me a while to realize that the German R's were very different also. And that they kind of changed depending on, you know, where they were inside the word and so on. And I don't even think I really, figured that out until after I'd already sort of forgotten how to speak it. Oh, really? Well. That's pretty awesome. Learning Russian also, huh? I actually have my master's in Russian, though right now I'm working on getting into medical school and becoming a doctor. Yep, I definitely had a lot of fun learning Russian. And still keep up with it and all of that. So. Yep. So, A1 level, well, I shall tell you ni pucha ni pira, which it's basically the Russian equivalent of break a leg, which, if you're not familiar with the idiom in English, means it's just sort of a roundabout way of saying good luck. It's a tough experience at first, but once you get the basics down, things do get a lot easier, and you really get to learn the intricacies of the language, and I think it's pretty rewarding. And I can't really tell you anything about learning Russian as a speaker of German. I can only really tell you about the experience as a speaker of English, but in that sense they're really not drastically different. At least as a German speaker, you don't have to get used to the idea of a spelling system that is actually consistent. Because German is usually pronounced pretty consistently with its spelling, and so is Russian. And as I'm sure you found out, English is not. Yeah, Russian and German, their spelling rules are really easy. They're spelled the way they sound. In English, there's no... Not only is there no guarantee of that, there's probably little chance of that being the case. And you will find when you're learning Russian that some really funny things happen when you're just kind of walking around. Like, we saw a sign for a restaurant called Chopped, and it was C-H-O-P-T, Chopped. But all of us, as people who spoke Russian, when we saw it, it looked like snort. And so the fact that Russians have an alphabet that looks a lot like what we use in English and German, but is pronounced but they just represent completely different letters, completely different sounds. It's something that takes a little bit of getting used to. And then, of course, people will forget. That they'll just forget their alphabet while reading things in Russian or writing things in Russian. And a common beginner mistake is, and I think instructors do this on purpose. They will tell a student, "Hey, write 'I want to go to sleep' on the board," for a first semester student, and they will go to write "Я хочу спать," but they will forget that that a Russian P looks like a Greek P, not the Roman P, but they will write it with the Roman P instead. But a Roman P in Russian actually represents R. So instead of writing "Я хочу спать," I want to sleep, they write "Я хочу срать," which means I want to go take a dump. And yeah, and I swear I've seen it so many times that I swear professors do it on purpose. Alright, so I'm not going to do all of this. I want to move on to something else, so I'm just going to wash the things that need washing real fast, and we'll move on to something else, because I think you all know where this is going. I thought about adding a whole bunch of corrosion to these little things here, but then I realized they're not pipes or tubes, they're just boxes. So I'm not going to have anything oozing out of them. That may change for other stuff, I don't know yet. We'll see. See what kind of mood I'm in when I have to paint a dozen of these. Let me see if this is something I need to take. Nope, not even close. Oh, yes, well, thanks. So I have to ask, where did you come up with your name? Tex-Mex? It was almost like Tex-Mex, which is a cuisine that is very common where I'm from here in Austin. In fact, I can probably go outside of my house and throw a rock in any random direction and I will hit a Tex-Mex place. So I am very curious how you came up with this name, or if it's just crazy coincidence. And also, I'm glad you enjoy bowls. Yeah, it's I've been friends with the owner for almost 10 years now. Yeah, it's getting close. And we've been trying to keep the community going as strong as we can, and when he was looking for someone to sort of add some painting to the show, Thomas and I definitely enjoy painting and talking to others about painting, so we both volunteered. And if you haven't seen him lately, he actually took a little bit of a break because he just had a kiddo, but he'll be back soon, maybe even as soon as next week. So, oh, you lived in Austin, okay. Did you go to school here or what? Oh, no kidding. BioWare, no kidding. I had a friend. I don't know if he still works there or not. I think his name, like, it's bad that I can't remember the names of people that I've known for years, but his name's Hall. I just can't remember what his last name is. I think it may be Hill or something like that. And he used to be a writer for BioWare, and it was around the same time, 7 years ago. He would have been there. Because my brother-in-law worked in the game industry, so he had a lot of friends in the game industry in Austin, even though he wasn't doing it anymore himself. Yeah, last time he was working on a game was Star Citizen, and it's been several years since he was on that project. Yes, he did. Yeah. Hall worked on Star Wars. He was part of the writing team for that. But, that was such a big project in terms of, like, artwork and animation and, what the different teams were doing. I'm sure it's perfectly reasonable for a lot of people on the development staff not to know each other. Because I even knew a guy who outsourced artwork for Star Wars, and I don't think any of my other gaming or video game industry friends, or at least anyone I knew who worked at BioWare, actually knew the guy, because he's not like one of those people you really saw like in the building. He was always going from country to country, just checking out artists to outsource artwork. So, oh, okay, EA. Wow, I bet that was fun. I don't know. I've never heard anything great about working for EA, but, it's kind of part of what they are. Yeah. I mean, EA occasionally comes out with a gem, but they really do they're just kind of a mill that churns out games lately. Well, they've been that way for years, but until that changes, really, they're not going to see too much of my dime directly, so. Even though they have a lot of things that have so much potential, and they just they don't make the most of it. And people have come to really realize that. And I'm hoping that, by consumers holding EA accountable, that they'll start actually delivering the things that we want to see in games, Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it, Tex. Yeah, it's hard to make a decent living in the gaming industry. Even if you're at a job that pays decently while you're at it, the jobs are so short and itinerant that, it doesn't make up for the time you have to spend looking for the next gig. And, I think it hurts the profession a lot. It's not every studio is like that, Blizzard can be very consistent if you're in the right job there. If you're in the right teams with the right game, you can definitely make a long-term living out of it. But there are I'd say some, but actually many developers where you're just kind of grist in the mill. You go in, you do the project, and then you wear yourself out for, a year, 2 years, 3 years on this one project, and then when you're done, you don't have a job anymore, and you're back to looking for another one. And, you made a decent living while you were there, but now but it wasn't enough to, keep you sustained while you're looking for that next job. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of that way of doing things. All right, so here's our Grey Knight that we were working on last week. Valdar, the name that he was chosen thanks to the random number generator in the Kill Team book. Let's see. I'm not sure if his base has been I don't know. I think it's been primered, but I'm not absolutely sure. So I'm gonna prime it real quick so we can get it prepped properly. I just need a paper towel. Not a paper towel, sorry, paper plate. Paper plate and a can of Mournfang Brown, that's all I need. I'm still here, I promise. I'm coming back. Fear not. Alright. That one's in the oven. So once that dries, I can show you guys how I use the texture crackle paint. Basically what I do to try to get decent results with it, because I know some people like just have tried it a few times and just couldn't get it to work. Well, I was pretty determined to get it working, so I kicked it in the pants till I found a way to make it work for me, and so I'll pass that along to you guys, and you can let me know sometime if it gave you results you liked. So we're almost there with this guy. Just a little bit of lining on his blade on the underneath, and we got his backpack left. So we're just gonna stick him right over here since he's got the putty on his feet. He's just gonna chill and watch us finish his backpack. Let's see how we're doing with the camera range. That's good. So, because I wanted this army done quickly, I came up with a very fast and easy way to do the armor for them. I wanted it to exude this sort of shiny, you know, sort of heroic feel to it. You know, this gleaming holy warrior stuff that, you know, is the big fluff of Grey Knights. And I just couldn't get that by using a wash. Like, the wash just turned out too dark, and it really just looked like just a piece of silver jewelry, which is not what I was going for. So what I do now is I paint the model with Calidor Sky, and then I take some Ironbreaker and then Runefang Steel. First the Ironbreaker, just give it a good dry brush. Probably a little too generous there at first, but That's okay. We're doing rank and file, guys, and this whole idea is to get it done quickly. So, as you can see there, you still see plenty of the blue coming through. And one thing that helps to do is prevent the silver from just looking like metallic white and nothing else. I mean, because silver is just like, you know, metallic gray / metallic white. And so it can be very difficult to make it interesting. So adding a color in there as part of the shade helps to make it a little bit more interesting. Note it does not necessarily make it all that better in terms of the painting quality. It's still just dry brushed. So if you're looking to try and win a Golden Demon or a painting contest of any kind of like real caliber, I would recommend instead doing non-metallic metal, or at least really thorough true metallic metal. But if you try to do a whole army using either of those techniques, you'll probably just go absolutely crazy. Which is why you don't see too many Golden Demon Grey Knight armies. Well, I mean, Golden Demons are single model entries anyway, but you know what I mean. An entirely metallic army is not always a great idea. That's the basic idea I'm trying to get across. And they could be fraught with pitfalls, so keep that in mind. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do them, because one characteristic they do have is that they do look great as an army, as long as it's not just the silver. If you have just the silver, your army is just going to look like it was just cast in silver. And I've seen someone cast their entire Chaos army, literally cast it in bronze. Don't do it. Just don't, please. Don't do that to your friends, your friendly local game store, which will kick you out for having super heavy, solid brass or bronze models on the table. So anyway, to end my rant in the most productive way, if you want to see what I mean by pitfalls of an all-metallic army, just look on Games Workshop's website and look at their Custodes army, and look at the Land Raider they painted for their Custodes. Now, I want to remind you that Games Workshop employs amazing painters. Like, they are way better than me, and the stuff they can do is, you know, the stuff they can do in the amount of time they have is pretty crazy. And they could not make that Land Raider work. They could not pull it off. It just ended up being hideous. And why? The same reason you don't see copper-colored cars. Because it doesn't work. I mean, you do see them occasionally, and they're hideous. They're just terrible. And it does not work. So, yeah. So, metallics definitely have pitfalls, and you gotta watch out if you're gonna do an army that's heavily metallic. And I mean, there are, you know, really amazing miniature painters. A lot of them won't use metallics at all. Just outright refuse to use them, and they will go non-metallic metal with anything that requires metallic look. And of course, it's more time-consuming, but that's their shtick, is doing very time-consuming type of work. So. I need one with a better... There we go. I think this one, maybe? Yes, which strangely enough, it works very well for cars. In fact, my car is silver. It actually does work really well. Because, I mean, white works for cars apparently also, but metallic white apparently works even better. But copper does not. Copper and gold are just awful colors for vehicles. And the same goes for 40K when you try to translate it to 40K. Why does silver work so well? I honestly don't know. And it works okay for minis. For minis, it doesn't make, being silver doesn't make a mini look awful. You just have to employ more ways to make the model interesting. Like for instance, in here I used the blue to add some saturation to the silver. So the silver itself looks bluish when you look at it, even though really it's just, you know, I just dry brushed gray onto blue. But the way it's perceived is that it's like a bluish steel. And so that's how I keep it interesting. That and I also, you know, make sure that my reds are super clean and have, you know, really good coverage so that they really come through. And the same with the whites. You know, when I get to my Death Guard, which I'll show you where we're starting from with the prototype. You know, very corroded, lots of chipping and all of that, and you juxtapose it with this guy who is like super gleaming cleanness. So I mean, you don't have to do Grey Knight super clean. You can definitely go like super weathered with them. That's just not what I chose to do in this case. I chose to go with something kind of clean, but I could also do decently quickly. Alright, let's see if our base is ready. Alright. I have a little bit of a dimple in the base, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'll fix that for my other ones, but for this it shouldn't really matter. It's a very slight dimple. Alright, now I gotta remember which one is the texture one and which one is... Okay, that's definitely the texture one. Yep, here's the goop. Oh, alright. It's been a little while, so hopefully this one's not too old. Now, the Chronicle paints have been around for a little while, so I'm sure some of you have tried them before. What I found out is best, you don't want to go super generous, but you don't want to go super thin. Like this thin right here, this is too thin. So we can't finish like this because we would get bad results. What you want it to look like, you want it to look like basically like the inside of someone's intestine. You want it to look basically kind of like that. I don't know how else to explain it, and I don't know if that explanation makes any sense, but you want it to look wet and juicy, but also smooth. And stuff's a little older than last time I used it, so I don't know how smooth I can get it here, but we're going to try. But if it looks thin at all, definitely needs to be thickened. But you don't want it too thick, because that will also ruin the effect. In fact, if it's too thick, it might not crack. And then, you know, what was the whole point? Now I know it makes it sound hard to work with, but once you've done it a few times, it's easy to get it going and get it working. So this may still be a little too thin. Alright, just covering a few spots that I think need a little bit extra. Now, why do I go through this much trouble? Because when it works right, the results are great. And it's totally worth it when it comes out properly. Alright. So you see here, kind of looks like, you know, almost like a wet piece of meat. Like we're trying to grow some chicken in a petri dish. Hey, Princess Red, welcome. Glad that you can join us. I hope you enjoy the stream. If you have any questions about anything at any time, feel free to ask. I will answer it to the best of my ability, even if that involves just making something up out of thin air. Alright, so we're going to place this over here in the incubator, paper plate, to dry. And we'll see how it turns out in a little bit. I'm going to give it a little extra airflow for my fan here. Hopefully that's not too loud if you can hear it at all. If you can't hear it at all, then even better. Alright. So as we move towards the finishing touches on this guy, just a little Agrax here on the gold. Oops. Now, most of the time I actually highlight my golds with some silver. Oh, so you typically check us out offline, or you know, like you check out the recordings? Well, I'm glad you could finally see me live. Now you can ask questions and interact with chat. You know, sometimes it gets a little quiet, so I always do enjoy having some interaction. Otherwise, you guys just get to see me rave about whatever sort of pops into my head at the moment. Oh, and since we do have quite a few people on at the moment, I thought this would be a good time to let y'all know. I don't think it's going to be next week, but sometime soon. Sorry, camera is getting pulled by its own cord here, so unimmersive. There we go. So sometime, hopefully in the next few weeks, maybe in the next month, we'll see. I want to do a special stream, what I like to call Bell of Dark Souls. And the idea is some night when Thomas is taking a night off, or maybe I'll do it on like a separate night from when I normally do the stream. Maybe I'll just set aside a special night for it. I'm going to do some models from Dark Souls, the board game, and afterwards I'm going to actually play some Dark Souls 3 and do some of the playthrough of that. And if we're lucky, actually, I might be able to finish the main campaign. I don't know. I don't go through it that quickly, usually, so we'll see. And it'll be something on like, it'll probably be on my Pyromancer, so it'd be like max New Game Plus. So we'll see, but I think it could be a lot of fun. And I think it'll be a good way to sort of ring in the next wave of Dark Souls board game stuff that's coming out very soon. At least the backers are getting it soon, I know that. So I don't know how soon the stuff is coming out for regular release, but the board game itself is already out, but the additional content is only coming out in just this little bit. So far I've only actually got to watch people play, but I'm liking it so far. It looks very well thought out. Like, they had some good ideas, like instead of pulling your forces, from the regular army lists, you have to go by their, sort of their parameters on what a kill team should look like. And I think that's a good idea, because otherwise, like, you'd never be able to take kill teams seriously as a game on its own, because it would be too imbalanced. Or you would have to have people, making their own house rules, which would just be endless and endless. Instead, let the game developers themselves come up with, with a set of guidelines for how to build a kill team based on, whatever your regular Warhammer 40k army is. Or if, you want to do something completely different, just, start from scratch and build a kill team for a completely different force. But I like that they have a set of, very defined guidelines for what you can do with a kill team, what you can put in it, while still leaving you, a pretty good amount of variation in terms of what loadouts you can do and all that. Now, whether or not there's a lot of variation in what's viable, that's sort of another question altogether, but, short answer, I think it'll be good. What I've seen out of it so far is pretty positive. But then I also, the only 40k armies I own right now are Grey Knights and Death Guard, which both are pretty good in kill teams. So there's possibly that bit of bias. But yeah, definitely lots of room for future development. More kill teams, more races involved. It'd be really cool if, like, whenever they finally redo Sisters, which they've been promising forever, to, like, almost immediately have a kill team, like, in the same month that, New Sisters comes out, a White Dwarf that has kill team rules for them. That would be awesome. Yeah, there's definitely a lot they can do with it. You know, my one fear, on the other hand, is that it will sort of kill Necromunda before I even, like, get to start building my Necromunda gang, but we'll see. We'll see what actually happens. You know, not a whole lot of people in my local area were playing Necromunda at the moment anyway, so... Alright, let's finish up this weapon here. Just had some white lining. So you'd think that this line would just be, you know, a thin line at the bottom, but we actually need it to be visible. So we have to kind of widen it. Oop. Have to widen it very gradually and deliberately. Nope, not that wide. That's not good. A little clumsy today. Actually, this one's probably already good how it is. Just got to remember that it has to be visible from the angle that people are actually going to view it. So you're looking at it from the bottom, of course, you can see it clearly, but over here, you know, you have to be able to get a hint of it from the bottom. And you're probably going to be seeing it. I mean, you're barely ever going to see it from this angle anyway, but... Alright, Tex. Well, I'm glad you could be here. So, yeah, take care, buddy. And, tschüss. Good luck, with the Russian. Может быть, когда-то мы можем поговорить по-русски. As you can see, because the place where these two blades meet doesn't give you this nice sharp edge that you can easily just sort of push the edge of your brush against, you have to make yourself a pretty rough line at first. Well, I mean, some people probably can do it the first time without any problem. Me, though, it's a little more rough. So first you got to get the line on there, and then from there it's not what you can paint on, it's what you can paint away. So I have some Calidor Sky mixed with white. I'm just gonna touch up here. Oh, one thing I need to mention, because I kind of broke this rule just now myself. Make sure when you're blending paints like this that your paints are very wet. Because if they're dry at all, they'll dry on you too fast while you're trying to blend. And it'll create little pockets. And in some cases, it'll create even texturing that you don't want, that you then have to figure out how to get rid of. So when your old buddy Duncan says thin your paints, there are a myriad of reasons why it's a good idea to follow that advice. Where are we at? I need my Cantor Blue. There you go. I know some of you are thinking, can't you just airbrush this? The answer is yes, if you have a good airbrush. I don't. I have a barely adequate airbrush, so I am stuck doing this kind of stuff by hand. Though, of course, these lines you can't do with an airbrush. You got to do them by hand anyway. And if you don't get them right the first time, well, it's kind of hard to clean up where you... It's kind of hard to, like, go back and touch up with a brush on a place that you originally airbrushed. At least where you airbrushed shading and highlights. If you're just airbrushed like the base coating, that's not really a big deal. Okay. Alright, so other than his base, I believe he is done now. So let me go check on his base, see how it's drying. May have to pull it out towards the end of the stream. Alright, so it's pretty much dry, but see, I still didn't get it thick enough. See, this is what came out, but this is what we want. If you look at my prototype, which obviously I can't use for Kill Team, yeah. So we're gonna have to give it another go. Give it the old Scrubberino and give it another shot. Alright, so see, I told you it's been a little while since I've done one myself, so we're gonna have to go a bit thicker to really get the result we want. And by a bit thicker, I mean probably a lot thicker. Alright, so we're going to use a stiffer brush because I think that will help us get it how we really want it to be. Some things you have to tease them into place, other things you have to force into submission. With these crackle paints, getting the results you want sometimes takes a little bit of both. And they have a lot of quirks, like you can't just gradually add more, because if you do that, they will actually just end up being completely smooth. Alright. And then of course I have to make sure I don't touch the edges too much. Alright. I need my... Alright, so we started out with some pretty thick guts the first time, but they were obviously not thick enough, so here is attempt 2 of the relearning how to do crackle paint properly process. Alright, give that some time to dry. It's definitely thicker than last time, so it could take longer. That's perfectly fine. Because that wasn't actually very long. That was, what, 20 minutes? Maybe? And we just needed to get dry enough so that we can dry brush the surface to give it some highlights, and then just glue the model to it. And that's it. Alright, so that's it for our Grey Knight until we get the base back. And then of course there is the rest of his kill team, you know, which is still in a much earlier phase of painting, but we'll address those guys at a later time. I may do them on stream, off stream, whatever, but we're done with them for now. The rest of the stream is going to be Death Guard and what we can do to bring our friend here to life. Oh, man, this grenade wants to come off again. Unfortunately, I had a failed experiment earlier on that I wanted to redo, so I had to scrub him down, but when I was scrubbing him down, I ended up breaking his little grenade here, so occasionally I have to fix it. I should probably use actual plastic glue instead of super glue. Make it a little more permanent, I think. But this will work for now. Alright. So as you see, I've already tried to do a little bit of the banding here and there. This was because I was trying different colors for the prototype. This has actually looked like this for a little while now. Oop, hold on. There we go. Because when I was first starting the stream, many months ago, one of the first things we worked on was prototypes for White Death Guard. Now these guys aren't completely done, but they're mostly done. But I've kind of decided that I want to try Green Death Guard instead. As much as the white looks really cool, but it's really a pain in a lot of other senses. And I want to try green because it's it's also an iconic Death Guard color and allows you to make other elements stand out by making them brighter rather than darker. When I was doing it in white, everything that's coming off of the model has to be dark, or it just kind of doesn't really stand out. Okay, I've got. Here we go. I think this is the right one. No. This is Balthazar Gold. I don't need that. I need. I think it's Runelord Brass. I like Runelord Brass because with Death Guard you can get a nice verdigris look using Nihilokh Oxide. Right. And even without Oxide it can still look very striking. For example, with this Blood Warrior from Shadespire. And this is just putting on Runelord Brass, Agrax Earthshade, and dry brushing with Runefang Steel, and that's it. And you get results that I really like. So now I gotta paint over the some of the old test metallic colors. Oh, and Princess, sorry, I forgot to thank you for the host. I was babbling about something when I saw that. Thank you very much. I know you're already watching, but I appreciate getting some more attention this direction. Even though I'm not a professional streamer, and so I don't rely heavily on viewing numbers, I appreciate always having more people here. It's always more people to interact with, more people that, you know, get to see what we do here, and not only that, but, you know, also get to see more about Bell of Lost Souls in general and not just the painting stream, and so. I always enjoy having new people. And I'm also glad you can finally be here in person. You normally work on Wednesdays, or? Oh, so you're at work. Okay. Yeah, my work schedule is very strange, so I never assume anyone has like a normal work schedule. Yeah. Well, I work 12-hour shifts and I don't even have time to be bored on my job. I don't think I've ever been bored at my job, my current job. I've definitely had boring jobs before though, for sure. And that's one thing I do like about this job, is it definitely keeps me on my toes, for sure. And, you know, it's kind of funny, like the way they do office jobs. You know, they want everybody to come in at the same time, so they all rush in to get to work at the same time. And then, you know, depending on what you're doing, you may not have a whole lot that you can accomplish at that time. And sometimes your quality of life would be better if you could just, you know, come in like an hour later and then work an hour later, you know, and, you know, just beat the traffic on both ends. But some bosses are like, well, you know, I want you to be here in case I have to call you. And then you're like, okay, you never call me. You call me like once a month. And even if I came in an hour later and left an hour earlier, I would probably still be here at that narrow time band in which you actually would probably call me about something. You know? So, yeah, some employers boggle my mind sometimes when they use that kind of reasoning for something that has a direct impact on the employee's experience. Like, you know, for your boss, it can seem like something trivial, even though it's something that affects you on a daily basis. And I'm not saying my job's immune to that, it's certainly not, but we out of necessity have less tolerance for BS because otherwise we just couldn't survive as an entity otherwise. But that's sort of one of the parts of being a, you know, 24-hour a day, 7-day a week thing, is that it's kind of what you're stuck with. Is this what I used? I don't think. Starting to wonder if Runelord Brass is what I used for my Death Guard. I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, that's definitely not what I used. I didn't use Balthazar Gold, that's for sure. I just think these look a little more different than I expected. But I think I may have already washed this one, so. so that could be why it looks a bit different. Oh, that's good. Excellent. Well, I mean, it had to be pretty laid back, though, for you to be able to watch Twitch while you're at work. I remember right when I had finished grad school and I was looking for a job, I worked as a security guard, just, you know, pass the time. And you don't really do a whole lot as a security guard, but they don't let you watch Twitch or anything in, like, a lot of jobs like that. Even though, you know, nothing's happening and they complain about people falling asleep. Well, it's like, you know, you could let them do something besides just sitting there waiting for their life to slowly end as their shift goes by. And I mean, that's the strange thing is, you know, a 12-hour shift for me in a hospital goes by like lightning. Like, I feel like I don't even have enough time to finish everything I need to do a lot of days. And you juxtapose that with an 8-hour shift as a security guard, and where it just drags by minute after minute. You could just feel every minute creeping by more and more slowly than the previous one. And yeah, I really like the faster pace. You know, a job where you have to handle a lot of things, but time goes by very quickly. Let's see here. I'm just gonna take a quick stock of my. Oh, it's over here. Tray where I keep all my metallics. I really doubt that I used that one. Oh, it could be this one. Let's see. Oop, I have to mix that a little more thoroughly. I actually hated having to be a jerk when I was a security guard, because it was always for, like, you know, minor things that people usually didn't do on purpose. Like, I never... Oh! Aha, I see. You could have just told me it was you. That's funny. So yeah, now I know who Princess Red is. Somebody that you could say I've known my whole life, or at least their whole life. Yeah. I don't even know what you do now. Like, but yeah, I know you live in a small town, so. I guess it makes sense, Princess Red. I get it now. I get it. That it's very appropriate. Oh. Is this really the color this is supposed to be? Or is this just not mixing properly? No, it's mixing properly. Okay. So the problem with this bronze could just be in my imagination. Because the banding here looks a little different, and I swear I used the same color. Ugh. But you never know with some drying time and the difference after washing. But I want to make sure before I paint a whole model. And you know what? Actually, I think this is it. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I think I found it. Here we go. Sycorax bronze. Yeah, because the Rune Lord brass definitely what I used for my Blood Warriors, but I'm thinking, yep, here we go. This is what I've been using for my Death Guard. So, and I want to stick with it because I like it. Oh, okay. Not doing the veterinary thing anymore? Really? Wow. Okay, so yeah, I'm bad at keeping up with other people and their lives. Apparently, that was 11 years ago. Last when you were working as like a veterinary assistant or vet tech or something like that. I know, my camera is terrible. You're just looking at my bald spot most of the time. So, yeah. My family inheritance, as I call it. But, at some point when I move into, like, a bigger space where I have room to actually bring in my really good painting desk, I'm going to have the camera looking at my work area as a whole, so I don't need this immersive screen behind me or anything like that. It'll just be, you know... Just too many psychos under one roof, huh? Yep. So the face cam setup, not the best, but I do like the cam that I have for minis. I think it works very well. I'm actually surprised at like how much you can see on a stream. And that I can like broadcast this in 1080p with, I think, no problems. I don't keep stats or anything to see if I'm dropping frames or anything, but nobody's ever told me about any problems with frame rate or any of that, so... Yeah, there's probably a reason, because this is what his hair looked like when he was this age. Yeah, just like his brother, and I mean both of his brothers. Yeah, maybe not quite as bad as theirs yet, but it's there. Yeah, I think my bald spot will hold its pattern pretty well, though, because at least with my grandfather, you could look in the front, and you couldn't tell. You had to look behind him, or see the top of his head, and that was till the day he died. So I think I can keep that going. I don't really mind it, honestly. Like if I thought I looked okay bald at all, I would just shave my head and just go bald. but my head's like, I don't know. I have like ridges like a Klingon whose head was born sideways. Um, so like, you know, if you like took the little head ridges and like rotated them 180 degrees, that's kind of like what my head looks like, bald. So I can't really do that. So I just oh no, not the comb over. I won't do it. No, I refuse. I mean, right now there's really not any way to comb over. I'd actually have to grow my hair out, and if I was going to do that, then they'd probably just cover it up anyway at this point. But you know, I still can't believe you play PUBG. I had no idea. Like when you told me that, I was like, wait, am I still talking to the same person? Yeah, like the little short Bobby one. Yeah, you never know. I mean, you know, I've lost 20 pounds the last 3 months working this new job. So, um, you know, give it a little while longer, I could have my Gucci model body back, you know. Yeah, I haven't played CS in so long, but you know, I used to play it so much back in the late 90s when it was just beta 6 and on from there. And man, I used to play it so much. And I even remember like on 9/11 I was playing Counter-Strike. And it was funny because, well, I mean, it wasn't really funny. It was kind of tragic, but it was also funny because counter-terrorists were playing so much harder that day if you were on that team. And so, because nobody wanted the terrorists to win. Oh, man. Yep. Had a lot of fun with that game back in the day. Yeah, yeah. I understand exactly what you mean, because it's an easy game to just to jump right into, and when the game's over, you don't have any, you know, once the round is over, you don't have anything you have to do maintenance-wise for the game. Like, there's so many games now that, like, you have to do so much maintenance to play them. Like, you know, World of Warcraft's a great game, but between raids, you have to do so much preparation. I mean, it really depends. It's not as bad as it used to be back in the day. But, I mean, you can get, like, you know, a month's worth of preparation done in, like, a few hours. And just coast on that. But still, you know, you have, like, a dedicated schedule to raid with your friends. And if you want a day off, then, you know, you have to let them know and try to make sure that they have enough people to do what they've got to, you know, to be able to accomplish something that night, you know, and it's, it can get very taxing after a while. Yeah, it really is. And it's not even the most work that you can end up having in a game, you know. Like, I love Destiny 2, but I just had to stop playing it because it got to be too much work for repetitive, like, rewards. Like, you get this... I'm doing another grind that feels just like the last grind, and the rewards are basically just, like, minor reskins or something like that. And I just got tired of it. You know, you're so busy trying to get things done in the game that you never really have any time to enjoy the game. And, you know, Counter-Strike has none of that. Counter-Strike is just like, yeah, you just go into a match and you play the game. You don't feel like doing the regular stuff? Okay, go into a custom map, or, you know, do some 20v20 weirdness, you know, on you know, on someone's private server or whatever. Or You know, it's all entirely up to you. And when you're done, when you're tired of the game, you just stop playing. You know? And I had some really good times with Counter-Strike. I was never, like, exceptionally good at the game. I was just okay. But I still had a lot of fun moments. And, I did have one match where I was particularly, like, on fire. Like, one set of matches. I was playing in that one warehouse map, you know, that has the big vent that empties into the main room. And then you got the hostages sort of off to the side from the vent. And the terrorists are all inside the warehouse. And I got rebalanced in a set of matches once, like 4 times on that map. It's just a server that was playing that map over and over again. And I was like 40 kills and like 1 death. And finally, like, somebody kicked me from the server because they thought I was cheating. Yeah, that was good times. That was also, like, 15 years ago. But nowadays, I mean, Counter-Strike is like a science. Like, if you're playing really competitive Counter-Strike, man, they are really, like the tactics and how you play out a round, which weapons to use, everything's so well thought out now. Back then, we just kind of did whatever. Is it Assault? I don't remember. I don't remember the map names very well. I kind of remember the maps themselves, but... And of course, I picked up Counter-Strike again a few times over the years, you know, like... Yeah, I remember when Dust was one of the few maps that, you know, we had, and then we had Dust 2, which, you know, was played a lot last time that I really, like, picked up the game. But there were some, like, kind of obscure maps that I really liked, too, and I thought were really fun. And of course, every game has, you know, any multiplayer game always has hilarious moments. I remember one time I was spectating a game where both teams had killed each other down to only 1 person. Oh, they took Dust out? Wow. Oh yeah, well, original Dust wasn't very well balanced. Dust 2 is at least a little more strategic. You know, you have to be ready to counter a rush, you have to be able to plan a rush and not, like, run right into everybody on the enemy team. You know, Dust 1, you could really, like, use a lot of approaches that just made it impossible to stop you. Because if your opponent went and defended the wrong like bomb site at the beginning, there was basically no way they could get to you in time to, like, stop you. And there were a lot of, like, safe spots where you could snipe people from. But I mean, that was a very early map in the game. I mean, Counter-Strike was barely, you know, was barely a thing when Dust 1 arrived. So, you know, Dust 2 was definitely taking, you know, Dust 1's aesthetics and saying, hey, let's, you know, let's make an actual balanced, you know, competitive map out of this. Actually, a friend of mine that I played WoW with, he was on one of the very first competitive Counter-Strike teams way back then, and you know, his some of his friends, if I remember correctly, the way he told it to me, he's like, some of his friends actually were the guys who sort of created VAC in the first place. and so, you know, sort of got the anti-cheat software off the ground. That is now sort of like standard, I guess, with a lot of Steam games. But for as involved as he was back then, he doesn't, I don't think he plays Counter-Strike at all now. I think my most fun moment I ever had with Counter-Strike, though, is we had a map where both sides had killed each other down to only one opponent each side. And you had this one guy who was just... yeah, that's true. There's a lot of hacks that get through still. There was one guy who was just hiding in a vent, looking out over this big room. This was one of those odd custom maps. You probably never saw this map, because I haven't seen it since then either. He's hiding in this vent, looking out, waiting for his opponent to show himself, so that, you know, so you can try to secure that last kill and not expose himself. Well, I'm looking at him in third-person view, looking at him face on. He's like looking down this vent like this, and then you see behind him just drop down the other guy. Just drops down behind him, and the other guy just creeps up with his gun. Then he puts away his gun, pulls out his knife, gets his flashlight, goes click, and it was just the most hilarious thing ever. And that was like one of my favorite moments ever from Counter-Strike. Hey, Painting to Scale, welcome to the stream. Hope you're having a good time. Hope you enjoy. We're working on some Death Guard at the moment. Just trying out the green scheme. Did some white ones, you know, a ways back, a few months ago. And now I want to try out the green one and see how I like it. And if I do, then I will be going full production for my kill team to start out. Got too many projects going at the same time right now to really like focus and get my whole Death Guard army painted, but I can get a kill team together, so I'll try and do that. I always hated the AWP, or AWP, whatever people call it nowadays. I remember for a while it had gotten nerfed and people were just using the Scout all the time, but it always kind of just goes back and forth. I don't think they necessarily nerfed the AWP so much as they buffed the Scout back then. So Death Guard, I mean, it probably will be my main army whenever I get it painted. Right now, it's mostly just you know, yeah, this is my amazing Death Guard army. Look here it is. No, I actually have like stuff assembled and things like that, but I got that box the other day so I can have more options for my kill teams. But I mean, at this point, it's not really like, it's not play ready yet. But I almost have enough minis where I could play it if I wanted, but I really want to get them mostly painted before I do that. So a big part of getting that going is, you know, getting these prototypes finished and deciding which one I like the best. I kind of like the idea of the green ones because it will allow me to paint the sort of like, you know, standout details like tentacles and bones and things in lighter colors. And when I did the white prototype, I had to kind of do them darker, or they just kind of didn't really stand out very well. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. Hey. See, and this one's almost done. Not completely. There's a few details I didn't quite finish, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going with this. So I like the way it looks, but you know, having to do like the horns in dark colors and you know, the tentacle pink stuff not really meshing very well, especially when you see this guy here. I just don't think the tentacles really like stand out as well as they should when attached to sort of this dark model. I know, this light model. And I think they'll just look better on a darker model. Like, I think their highlights will actually show through better. So, oh, hey! Thanks, Princess Red, for the Twitch Prime sub. Oh, okay, gotta fix my camera. I appreciate that, you know. Now you can keep tabs on me? No. This is actually not my private Twitch channel. For those of you not familiar, Bell of Lost Souls is actually a organization that deals with news and events and other hobby aspects of miniature wargaming. And so I just do one 3-hour painting stream a week with them. And when I stream on my own, I have my own account that I do that with. But I don't really like stream much on my own anymore, so. But when you sub to this channel, you are supporting the Bell of Lost Souls organization, which indirectly also supports my Hobby Habit, because I do get promotional stuff from them, and I get to keep coming on here and painting for you guys, and talking about occasionally things that have to do with miniatures and painting, every now and then. And if you're interested in seeing the sort of news and wargaming aspect of Bell of Lost Souls, I definitely recommend you check out belloflostsouls.net or .com, probably redirects to it now. Probably not bowls.com, because I think that just gets you to the vodka people. Man, this stuff is really not sticking on very well today. I'm trying to find like actual blue tack, and I can never find it anywhere. Yeah, Princess Red, you're gonna have to add me on Steam. I'll have to install Counter-Strike someday. That way I can give your opponents a moving target, you know, to shoot at instead of you, so you can actually take some people out before I die. I'll just run in with the auto shotgun and make a lot of noise. Yeah. It's funny juxtaposing Counter-Strike and real life, you know. In the Marines, when they teach you how to clear a room, it's like, okay, this guy's going to go in first, he's going to clear low left, you're going to go in second, you're going to clear low right, you know, and it's all it's all very methodical and planned out. Then room clearing in Counter-Strike. Just run in the room with the auto shotgun and shoot in every direction really fast. Is Italy still a map on Counter-Strike Go? CSGO? Do they still have Italy? Yeah, I used to love that one. Because I used to love going mid with an auto shotty and just waiting for people to try to come through the, you know, through the house, like the indoor passageway. And you could sometimes get like 3 people, like all in a group, and just mow them all down with an auto shotty. Those were the days. Of course, back then it also felt like M4s auto-aimed for the head every time, somehow. Alright, so we've been sitting here just painting the same color of bronze onto the same Death Guard model for a while. Let's apply some wash to the parts that are done, and then I can show you guys, once that's dry, how I do the verdigris. So I want to do that and make sure we have enough time that you guys can see that part, because that's definitely one of the more interesting aspects of how this model gets done. And I'm also going to go over hairspray chipping, which I showed earlier in this stream, but I think we have a lot of different people now, so I'm just going to briefly sort of go over that again. Because if you look at the chipping on this model is also done using hairspray chipping. So I think it's useful for anyone who's interested in how this model was painted to also see the hairspray chipping, because that's a big part of how the model looks. So, a quick question for the audience. Do you think you've been painting too long when you can actually comment on the fact that Agrax Earthshade doesn't taste very good? Or have you been painting too long when you've gotten to the point where Agrax Earthshade starts actually tasting normal to you? Oh yes, of course. I don't even know why I looked at my phone. I knew that was coming. Yep, and Princess Red, once I add you on Steam, I'll also add you on Twitch later on when I'm on my normal account. So you'll see me on there. It'll be the same name as like what I run under the title of for this stream, so it'll be pretty obvious it's me. Though I may change since I don't ever stream for Bell of Lost Souls under the name. I mean, since I only stream as the Veteran Sergeant on Bell of Lost Souls, I may actually just change my regular Twitch account name back to like something else, but something that like other people I game with might recognize instead. But so Jamie, how is it that you like being toxic in games and you have not tried Dead by Daylight yet? So actually, I mean, since they're acrylic paints, most of the time they're all basically the same. But these washes are a little bit different because they're They're just fluids. So, strangely enough, they actually taste different from one to the next. And probably none of them good. Alright, just wait for that wash to dry real quick, but we should have our Oh, you have Left 4 Dead? Yeah. So, Dead by Daylight's not really like Left 4 Dead. I'd probably say the game that's most like Left 4 Dead is probably Vermintide, but it doesn't have like a versus mode, or at least 1 didn't. I don't think 2 does. But check out some streamers playing Dead by Daylight sometime and see if you like it. I think it's hilarious. Like, I love it, but I don't really like being toxic in the game, but there's definitely a lot of people who enjoy being toxic in that game. Alright, here we go. There we go. Now it turned out how we wanted it. See that? Nice and cracked. Now, it's not dry enough yet to put the model on, so we're probably not going to get to do that today. Not going to get to dry brush it or put the model on it, but I give you an example here. For those of you who didn't see it earlier, this is the prototype. And I do plan on adding a little bit more stuff to the base later, but... And here's the model we finished earlier on stream that will go on it. See, very bright and shiny juxtaposed to the Death Guard. Which, my kill teams for starting out for kill team are going to be one Death Guard kill team and one Grey Knight kill team. So not only can I, you know, have some different teams I can play with, but also, you know, it gives me the option to be able to play at home some if I want. So. Alright. It's dried enough that we can pull out the oxide. And this, if you're doing Death Guard or anything where you want to have some corrosion, this is a great one. Well, these two both actually are really good for like corrosion effects, but this one we'll get to a little bit later, or maybe I'll show you with some of the terrain I did earlier. But for right now, I'll show you a little of the oxide. And you get this stuff, you may want to make sure it's pretty damp, because it can dry on you very quickly. And also it being a little more moisture in it gives you the ability to sort of manipulate it more into the, you know, cracks and crevices, which is where you'd logically find, you know, the most fresh oxidation, since it tends to get knocked off in higher areas by just getting banged around. And so that's where you want to see all your oxidation, is sort of in the cracks and crevices. And for those unfamiliar, this model I'm painting here is a Plague Marine. Comes from a faction of Warhammer 40k called the Death Guard, though there are other, you know, non-Death Guard Plague Marines. Most of the time, there are the best known one by far is the Death Guard. It's sort of the iconic one in a big way. So anyway, they worship, and more than just worship, but also receive many gifts from the god of plague, disease, and death. Which, as terrible as it sounds, and actually would be, amongst the chaos gods of Warhammer 40k, the god of decay, death, and you know, plagues and diseases and so on, is actually the most personable of all of the chaos gods, and probably the only one who actually cares about his subjects and looks upon them as his children. Whereas the others kind of just look at followers as pawns that just kind of get thrown away when they're no longer useful. But just because he really cares about them doesn't mean he doesn't get them really sick and disgusting looking. Because all of their stuff is corroded, it is full of disease. They readily use disease as a weapon, considering it more of a gift, really, to their enemy than anything. To them, they're not, you know, employing biological weapons. They're bringing the gift of their gods to those who would otherwise miss out on them. And, you know, for a long time I'd always mulled over doing a Death Guard army, but the models I had felt were not quite there yet. But the models they've been doing over the last, you know, year or so with Death Guard are just absolutely amazing. And just, like, when I saw them, like, on site, I said, I really want to paint those. Like, those just look amazing, and I really enjoyed the ones I painted so far. But the white paint scheme has proven to take a little bit too time-consuming. So I'm trying with the green, taking my first test prototype for the green and just sort of running with it, seeing if I can take him to completion. And I'm thinking it's going to be, a go, though. I'm thinking we're going to go with him. And I think we're going to make a whole kill team out of these Death Guards, so in the green color. So, and really this is just starting out, like, there is a whole lot that's going to change on this model. This is basically like, you could almost call this step 2. Just getting the banding and everything done. You know, the big broad stuff. But really, when the details start getting painted, that's when this model will really come to life, and you get an idea of where we're going here. I mean, I can sort of give you a general idea if you take a look at, you know, the white prototype for the Army. You see a lot of the same things will still be there, but but some other things will change. Like the bones are going to be lighter for this guy. I had to go with dark bones because you can't go with white bones on a guy whose armor is white. You won't ever notice that they're there. They just sort of become superfluous details, and we don't want that. We don't want you know, big parts of the model to be superfluous details. You know, things like these tubings coming out of his mask, you know, and this big tube going across here, those you can make superfluous details. But something like these horns here, you really want to make the most out of those, so you can't really like deliberately minimize them. You just kind of, I mean, you can, but it's not the best approach. You can really get so much more out of trying to emphasize them in some way or another. And I did that by painting them dark on the other model, but and it worked fine. But I think it's more fun painting them in like actual bone colors because you can do more with it. If you see right here, you notice that it seems I'm being a little generous with the oxide, but what I actually like to do is to be a little bit generous with it and then go back and touch up afterward to really get the look that I'm looking for. You really got to go back and touch up some with your original metallic color as well. Which we're going to start some of now. And it's not like a crazy amount, just a little bit. Just to get your full original bronze color showing through. For banding like this, it's just a little bit along the edges. You know, for bigger details, yeah, probably a little bit more, but I see a spot here that I didn't. Well, I did go through with this with some oxide, but it's not really showing up very well, so I'm going to do a little bit more. And you know, it's a neat little technical paint. Is you can just sort of target a few spots here and there, and just put a little bit of extra. It doesn't have to be, you know, so uniform because it's a type of corrosion. It's not shading you're trying to add. You're adding corrosion effects to the model. So you don't need that, you know, rigid consistency. In fact, if anything, you don't really want it. And the stuff actually dries pretty quickly, if you've noticed. May have overdone it a little bit, but that's easy to fix. There we go. Here's a good example because this one's so covered in the oxide. You just want to kind of, same way you would like blend two colors together, just sort of slowly add a little bit of the bronze. Metallics usually go on pretty thin anyway, so this is pretty easy to do regardless. And there you go. I think I want to add a little bit more here. Okay, well, I'm going to be done in 20 minutes, so, but, you know, I'll add you on Steam, so, you know, if you see anything in my library you also want to play, just let me know. Anyway, I'll talk to you later either way, so it's good seeing, good talking with you anyway. So, take care on your way home. Alright, so since we're getting close to the end here, let's go ahead and start talking about hairspray chipping. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it is a technique for getting some fairly realistic chipping. You can do it with or without an airbrush, though an airbrush does make it easier. And if you don't have an airbrush, you pretty much have to use a spray paint. Well, at least one of your colors has to be a spray paint. If you go without an airbrush. Alright. And of course, if you don't think it's corroded enough when you're all done, you can just add more. Neolock oxide works like that. You can just keep going with it until it looks the way you want it to. Alright, so we're going to take a minute from that, and we're going to go back over some hairspray chipping, because I have something that I'm actively doing hairspray chipping on right now, which is the Kill Team terrain. So, while I'm already on to other aspects of the terrain, there are some things I wanted to show you that you can also use, or that I also do use for my Death Guard. So, the hairspray chipping, the first thing you do is you apply the color you want the chipping to be. In this case, I applied Administratum Gray. And then, once that's all nice and dry and on there, now you can also paint on, you can like, just use a regular black primer and then paint the other color you want your chipping to be over it. Obviously, if you're doing something like a building for that, that's going to be very time consuming. You probably just want to use a spray that sprays all that color. Alright, next thing you want to do is spray the entire model with hairspray. Just regular old hairspray that you can get at the drugstore. Once that's dry, you take an airbrush or another spray can, if you don't have an airbrush, of the color that you want the majority of the subject to be. In this case, you know, this sort of off-white color. It's Karak stone, actually. And once it is airbrushed on there, nice and uniformly, you know, you take your dried piece. And I need to change my water for this because my water's gotten a little too infused this session. All right. So, you can use an old brush, you can use an old toothbrush. There are actually a lot of different things you can use, but you just dampen it a bit. Choose the area where you want your wear to be, or if you want it uniform, you can just do it everywhere at once. But either way, you just start kind of scrubbing away. You want to do it lightly at first, because sometimes it can get away from you and you can end up, instead of having chips, you can have like just huge chunks of, you know, places where you don't have any paint anymore. See, here I'm going for places where I think there's going to be more wear and tear for having the most chipping, especially places that have like breaks and cracks in them and so on. So I try to emphasize those a little bit more. And then, you know, when you get to these walls and so on where you expect there to be a little bit more paint on the walls, you just kind of go for some light chipping here and there. You know, the corner, of course we got to get the corner, but the corner is probably going to see sort of like, you know, the least real wear and tear. So we'll just be kind of, you know, sparing with our chipping. And up here towards this completely busted ceiling. Well, there is no ceiling. It's just the remaining supports of the window that it's probably been shattered for decades now, or maybe even a week ago. Who knows? Who knows when this building got blown up? But, you know, it's definitely in bad shape now. I hesitate to say that, you know, being, you know, Imperial, that it's an ancient ruin or anything like that. It certainly is not. But even a newly blown up building can be pretty shredded and chipped up in no time. And here where we have, you know, things that have been blasted apart or just completely shredded off of our building, we just add quite a bit more chipping. So remember, this is not where we're stopping. This is just another step along the way, so there'll be other things that kind of still pull things together. Alright, as you can see here, we got some really nice chipping going on. And I already did the other side earlier for our early birds who were here when the stream started. Just a few spots left on this side to go, so why not go ahead and finish it. And, you know, not everything has to be super scraped up, but whenever you're doing something like this, you know, a figure or a building or whatever, make sure that you give it a once-over and make sure that, you know, it at least looks logically consistent. Like, you know, you're not going to have one part that's, like, super torn up and super, you know, chipped up, and then have, like, you know, another wall that's just super pristine. While it's not unrealistic, because that can actually happen, doesn't necessarily look very good, like, from a miniature standpoint. Looks better for there to be some consistency there. Alright. Like right here, I want there just to be a little bit more chipping than what we've got. There we go. Now, to get there, from there to here, what I did was I applied a decent amount of Seraphim Sepia. Wasn't trying to be super neat like I usually am when I'm working on a figure. In this case, you know, if it kind of like, you know, pools a little bit in places like here and there, it actually, you know, adds a little bit of character to the building rather than, you know, making it look lazy. Because, you know, you totally expect that a building that's exposed to the elements is going to have, you know, gunk sort of gathered up in some places, and rain and oil and things like that. And so, you know, spots like this where you don't necessarily have quite as uniform or careful of a coat of wash don't really detract from the model at all. So it actually kind of works well with it. And also it's terrain. You don't have time to be that careful, usually. And then, once that's dry, I just give it a good old dry brush with Screaming Skull. In this case. So, you know, it depends on what color you're using, of course. You want to use an appropriate highlight to that. But in this case, I like it because our main color is sort of an off-white color, and Administratum Gray is our, color that lies underneath all this painting. And Screaming Skull works well as sort of a highlight to both. So I can just dry brush this on with reckless abandon, and it doesn't mess with the chipping effect at all. The gray still looks very natural to the model, and the chipping looks very sort of organic to everything else that's happening, which is what we want. Now, the rest of the details are not finished quite yet on this model. I'm still doing a little experimenting here just to see how I like things. It's time to dry brush a little bit of Runefang Steel. Runefang Steel is a very bright silver, but if you use it properly on just as sort of an overbrush for things that have been painted a darker metallic color, like with Leadbelcher in this case, and then washed with Agrax Earthshade. A little bit of Runefang Steel works very well as a quick dry brush highlight for that. It's not normally the brush I use for dry brushing, but in this case I want to be a little more controlled, so I'm trying to keep it something small. Sorry. This part I'm going to have to paint off stream, but I'm definitely painting that part, so don't worry. Alright. And, as promised, I'm gonna quickly... man, what's going on? I promise I'm not dying. I promise. I think. Alright. Where is the... Here we go. Typhus Corrosion. What I found is one of the best uses for this. See these tubes here? I just painted them in Iron Breaker. Not Iron Breaker, sorry, Leadbelcher. As I tend to do with things that I want to be dark and metal. Then I took Typhus Corrosion and just painted, a thin coat of it. It's kind of textured, so you got to get used to that. But I just kind of painted it, in a nice little thin, even. Well, it doesn't really have to be even, honestly. Sometimes it's better if it's not even. But anyway, you'll figure it out if you ever try to work with it. It's a little strange, but you should definitely give it a try if you want to do things like conduit and things like that. So you give it a nice coat of that, but then after you're done, you take, usually a brush that has very short bristles or something you can control very well, but is still kind of stiff. And you just run it over here, you just kind of brush down on it, and it'll bring out some of that metal that was underneath again. And that allows you to have the corroded look, but also, having some of the metallic through makes it more believable, makes it look more real. Or at least just better, in any case. I mean, as real as anything gets in the Warhammer world. And so there you go. All I got to do is just paint these little alcoves, which is going to be a combination of what I did here with a little bit of this also, place to place. And then I'm probably going to paint these skulls, because even though I could totally leave them like this, I just have this feeling like I really want them to look, more like real skulls. I don't know why. But, yeah. It's just a thing. But that's it. That's all I did for, or am doing for this terrain piece. And then, the several half dozen, or actually almost dozen others that need painting. I'm going to be very busy. So, well, we're out of time. I'm glad you could join us, and I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope to see you again. GoBoy's going to be back soon. He had a kid recently, so he's been very busy. He hasn't been having his usual 8 p.m. Central Time stream, but he will be coming back as early as next week. So, and keep in mind, some point I want to do the Bell of Dark Souls, where we have 3 hours of painting some minis from Dark Souls, the board game, which, I think there are some really fun minis because they are very true to the in-game characters. And, we got the next little expansion pack should be arriving pretty soon. And if I get that before I do that stream, then we can also throw some of those in there. And then, following the painting part, I'm going to be actually playing some Dark Souls 3. Maybe doing a little playthrough there with my Pyromancer, maybe, because she's up to new game, I think 6+, I think is the max difficulty level, so she'll be there pretty soon, and I'll get her ready for that by then, and so that'll be fun. So if you're a fan of Dark Souls, like I am, then you'll probably enjoy that a great deal, and in any case, that's not next week, it's coming up. I mean, it could be next week, but I'd rather have a chance to give you guys a warning and, and hear from GoBoy for a night that he's not going to be streaming, so that way I have that whole time and I can go as long as necessary to, get a decent portion through the game, if not complete it. Not counting the DLCs, we just don't have enough time to do the DLCs also if we do that. But I think it'll be fun, so I hope you get to join us. We'll be here, of course, next Wednesday, 3 p.m. Central Time. I hope to see you then, and thanks for joining us. Have a good one.